Hey everyone, it's Lani. For those of you who don't know who I am a story expert. I'm a New York Times best-selling novelist. I am an award-winning podcaster, and I'm owner of Chipperish Media, co-host of Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast, Listen Up A-Holes, a Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast, How Story Works, a narrative theory podcast, and now I am so excited to announce Endless, a Sandman podcast. That is correct. I said Sandman. From the DC universe, I am joined by the illustrious Skeleton Key author, Alisa Kwitney. By Skeleton Key author, I mean someone who has rattled around in about every genre and has unlocked almost all of them. Alisa, who I will often call Quits, has a background in editing. She actually edited and worked on a lot of the Sandman comic books with Neil Gaiman, and has written some Sandman stuff and a lot of novels, and actually has a book coming out that is a Marvel book. It is Rogue Untouched, and that will be out, or has just come out, or came out a long time ago, depending on when you're listening to this recording. Anyway, Alisa, you are so much more qualified to introduce yourself than I am, so why don't you go ahead and do that?
Sure. I am Alisa Kwitney. In the 90s, I was the assistant editor on the Sandman comic that has been collected into various graphic novels. I also then was the full editor on the spin-off series The Dreaming, which was written by various authors, and the first editor on Lucifer, another spin-off. Let's see, what else? Who am I? I have continued. I wrote Sandman, The King of Dreams, which was a book about the Sandman series. And I've continued to work with Neil. I was something like a doula on the Norse Book of Mythology for 7 years. And I teach writing, and both prose and graphic novel writing, and I write myself. I've got some books and comics that are coming out this year, and I'm really excited to be talking about The Sandman, which was a series that I just was in love with before I was hired at DC, and just I lived imaginatively in the dreaming for a lot of years.
Oh, I'm so excited to have this discussion. Now, I have done some work with comic book properties in my podcast, Listen Up A-Holes, which was about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I watched the cinematic universe. Like, I talked about the movies, I talked about the TV shows, and my co-host, who was a comic book expert, Joshua Unruh, who's brilliant. He was able to talk to me about the comic books, but I haven't actually dived in, I don't know, whatever, into the comic books yet. So reading these in preparation for doing this podcast with you has been such an eye-opening experience. And I'm very excited to get a chance to talk about the narrative and the storylines and all of that, and how stories are told in a comic book form, how that differs. Every form has different strengths, and I'm really interested in the comic books are probably the form of narrative that I have interacted with maybe the least. I've played a lot of video games, and, I've read a lot of books, and I've, watched a lot of TV and a lot of movies, and, and all that kind of stuff. But I haven't really gotten into like comic books and graphic novels as much. But I'm really excited about having these conversations with you. Having been an editor, you understand like the coding and the language of comic books, and I'm so interested to learn that. So I'm very excited about this opportunity. Also, everybody has probably already heard, if you're listening to this podcast, I imagine you have some express interest in the TV show that is going to be coming out from Netflix. So we don't know as of this recording when exactly that is going to drop. So we're going to try to time ourselves as well as we can. We're going to be doing 10 or 11 episodes, doing the first 2 volumes of Sandman comics. We're doing Preludes and Nocturnes and The Doll's House. So we're going to be reading those. So everybody go out and get your volumes, get all of that, because we're going to be reading all of those. We're going to be talking about them. We're going to be doing story analysis. You'll be coming from your area of expertise and your experience with these books. I'll be coming at them from my narrative expertise and my complete novice status with talking about stories in terms of comic books and how comic books tell stories.
I was just going to say that for a lot of people who may be fans of Neil Gaiman's prose novels and fans of the movies, this may be for some people the first time reading a comic or a comic of his, or the first time reading a comic in a lot of years. And it's such a good and inviting way to start. Unlike trying to figure out where to enter or re-enter the Marvel universe or the DC universe, where so much has been established about characters, this has a clear beginning, middle, and end. It is a clear work of literature and mythology. And so it's really so easy to dive in.
I love too that it is so incredibly accessible for people who can get overwhelmed. I mean, comic book universes are huge. And so being able to kind of like go into this place to have a completed narrative that you can go in and you can experience is just going to be so much fun. So we're going to be doing these episodes, 10 more episodes after this one. We're going to start talking about Preludes and Nocturnes, and then we're going to talk about The Doll's House. The first episode, which is going to be in your podcast feeds on June 29th, will start with Preludes and Nocturnes. We're going to talk about the introduction that is in the volume, which is some information from Neil Gaiman about the experience of writing it. And we're going to do the first story in that set, which is Sleep of the Just. Again, that is going to be in your podcast feed on the 29th. So be sure to subscribe now through whatever podcast format is happiest for you, to Endless. I don't even think I told them what the name was. I'm so terrible at this. You would not know that I do this for a living. Endless is the name of the podcast. We're doing Endless, talking about the Sandman comics and TV show. It's going to be very, very exciting. All right, Quits, you got anything to add?
I think that one of the things I can add is that if people get interested in comics, we can also talk about how Neil's comics can show you the way, not just to how to read comics, but how to write comics. And for a lot of people who are interested in writing scripts or screenplays, this is another interesting way to think about creating story.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I'm so excited to have these conversations. All right, everybody, June 29th, mark your calendars, get your podcast apps all subscribed to Endless, the Sandman Podcast.